Chapter 1. The Road to Nowhere. The road was older than memory. It wound out of the town like a forgotten scar, the asphalt cracking into jagged veins that led nowhere people wanted to go. The street lamps that lined it had long since gone dark, their bulbs yellowed and hollow, leaning like crooked teeth above the path. Grass grew up through the fissures, wild and tall, as if trying to reclaim what had once been stolen from it. Most people in town avoided it after dark. A few drove it during the day, usually out of necessity, farmers cutting across fields, delivery trucks taking the shortcut, but none lingered. None stopped their cars to stretch their legs. None wandered off the shoulder to explore. Because there was something at the end of that road, and the locals swore it didn't like being disturbed. On a late autumn evening, as the sun bled away in slow orange streaks, a lone traveler found himself on that road. His name was David Carter, though he hadn't heard anyone call him David in years. To his friends, he was Carter, and to most strangers, he was just another man passing through. He wasn't superstitious. He didn't grow up with the whispered warnings of the town. To him, the road was simply a quicker way to reach the motel a few miles further along. The first mile felt ordinary enough, just cracked pavement and the quiet crunch of tires. But as twilight deepened, the air changed. The trees pressed closer together, their branches arching overhead, until the road seemed swallowed by a tunnel of black. Carter turned down his radio. He wasn't sure why. The silence felt thick, expectant. That was when he saw it. The house. It stood just beyond the tree line, perched on a small rise of ground, as though the earth itself had lifted it to be noticed. 2 stories tall, with a pitched roof and windows that reflected the last of the sun's fire. From a distance it looked well kept. No holes in the roof, no broken shutters. Yet there was something uncanny about its perfection, as though it were only pretending to be abandoned. Carter slowed the car without meaning to. His hands had acted before his mind caught up. He stared at the house, drawn in by its stillness. The road curved away, urging him to keep going, but his headlights illuminated the gravel path leading up to the front steps. Something inside him, a small whisper of curiosity, or perhaps loneliness, murmured that he could stop, just for a moment, stretch his legs, see what was inside. After all, it wasn't every day you found a house like this, untouched by time. As he idled at the roadside, he noticed something else. The house's front door was ajar, only slightly, a crack wide enough to catch the dying light. Strange, he muttered to himself. He cut the engine. The sound of the motor faded into the heavy silence of the woods, and he realized he could hear the faintest creak, like wood shifting against wood in a rhythm too deliberate to be the wind. He grabbed his flashlight from the glove box and stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched beneath his boots, each step sounding louder than it should have. Behind him, the trees rustled, as though stirred by some unseen breath. The door waited ahead, open just enough to suggest invitation. For reasons he couldn't explain, Carter whispered as he reached the porch. "Hello?" The house sighed back through the groan of a floorboard somewhere deep inside. And then the silence swallowed him whole. Chapter 2. The Locals' Warnings. Hours before Carter ever set foot on the road, he'd passed through the last town on the map. A scatter of shops, one diner with a crooked neon sign, and a gas station where the pump nozzles rattled when they dispensed fuel. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and where strangers were noticed immediately. The diner had been nearly empty. A single waitress leaned against the counter, flipping through a gossip magazine, with pages so worn they looked translucent. Two men sat in the corner booth, caps pulled low, nursing mugs of coffee gone cold. Carter had slid into a booth near the window and ordered a black coffee. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes but a surprisingly kind smile, poured it without asking questions. She did, however, ask one thing after setting the cup down. "Where you headed?" Carter shrugged. "Just passing through. Got a motel reservation a few miles up." The waitress's smile faded a little. "Which way?" "West," he said. "Taking that old back road. Shorter." The two men in the corner stopped talking. They didn't look up, not exactly, but Carter felt their attention shift toward him. The waitress hesitated, her hand still on the coffee pot. "I wouldn't," she said softly. "Wouldn't what?" "Wouldn't take that road. Not after dark." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it. Like she wasn't offering advice, she was delivering a warning. One of the men in the corner cleared his throat. He was older, with a weathered face that looked like it had been carved from bark. "You're talking about the Miller place," he said, finally looking over. His eyes were pale, cloudy with age. "Ain't nothing good waiting down there." Carter gave a half smile, the kind people wear when they don't want to be rude, but also don't believe a word. "Ha! Haunted house story?" Neither man laughed. The other, younger by maybe a decade, leaned forward. "It ain't haunted. Not like you mean. It's worse." Carter sipped his coffee, pretending not to feel the prickling along his arms. "Worse how?" The men exchanged a glance. It was the waitress who finally answered. "People go missing out there. Always have. Kids who dare each other to spend a night. Drifters like you. Even a couple locals. They never come back. Or if they do..." She trailed off, biting her lip. The older man finished for her. "They ain't right after. Like the house keeps a piece of 'em." Carter chuckled, but it sounded hollow in his throat. Every town's got its ghost stories. "Maybe so," the waitress said, her tired eyes meeting his. "But not every story watches you back." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Carter left a few bills on the table, drained the last of his coffee, and told himself it was just small-town superstition. People liked their legends. They needed something to whisper about on long nights. But hours later, as he stood on that creaking porch and stared at the door ajar, those words came crawling back. Not every story watches you back. The floorboards sighed again inside the house. Chapter 3. The House in Waiting. The front porch groaned under Carter's weight. Paint peeled from the boards in long curls, and the railing was slick with moss where rain had licked it year after year. The door hung slightly open, a black slice of shadow inviting him into the hollow lungs of the house. He stood there longer than he meant to, his flashlight beam trembling across the threshold. He could almost turn back, almost walk down the path, get into his car, and keep driving to the safety of some motel where the only sounds were ice machines and muted televisions. Almost. But the silence of the place, it was magnetic. The kind that didn't just fill the air, but pressed against the skin. And beneath it all was that steady creak, like something rocking, like a rhythm waiting for him to match. Carter pushed the door open. The hinges shrieked, and dust bloomed in the air. The smell hit him first. Old wood, mold faint in the corners, and something else, something sweet, almost metallic. "Hello?" He called again, quieter this time. His voice came back to him, warped, like the house had swallowed it and spit it out slower. The entryway was wider than expected. A grand staircase rose to the second floor, the banister carved with patterns dulled by grime. To his left stretched what must have been a parlor, its furniture draped in sheets that sagged like tired shoulders. To his right, a dining room where the table still stood, long and skeletal, a single chair pulled out as though waiting for him. His flashlight swept across the walls, catching the faint shimmer of wallpaper peeling in strips. Beneath the peeling paper were faint scratches, too shallow to be letters but too deliberate to be chance. He leaned closer. Were they claw marks? Nails dragged in frustration? Something shifted upstairs. A slow wait, one step, then another. He froze, light jerking toward the staircase. "Anyone there?" Silence. Then, after a long pause, the same sighing groan of a floorboard, but closer now. Carter exhaled hard. Probably just the house settling. Old places do that. He said it aloud, though the sound of his own voice offered little comfort. He forced his feet to move. Past the dining room, through an archway, into what had once been a kitchen. Rusted pots hung from hooks. A clock above the stove had stopped at 3:17, hands unmoving, though the faintest ticking still sounded if he pressed his ear close. Too faint, too steady. In the center of the kitchen table lay a book. Thin, leather-bound, its pages yellowed and curled. A guest book, maybe, or a ledger. He brushed dust away and flipped it open. The first pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates, names, remarks, "Beautiful home, thank you for your hospitality." Then, further down the pages, the writing grew messier. Strange noises at night, couldn't sleep, the walls are moving. And later still, nothing but jagged scratches crossing the paper, tearing into the next pages. Carter snapped the book shut, pulse quickening, his flashlight beam quivered. The house groaned again, this time not from above, from directly behind him. He turned sharply, heart in his throat. The dining room doorway yawned empty, but the chair, the one pulled out, was no longer empty. It rocked. Slowly. Forward, back. Forward, back. No one sat in it, yet it rocked as though someone had just arisen to greet him. Carter's throat went dry. He whispered before he could stop himself. "Hello?" The rocking chair stopped, dead still, and the silence rushed back, heavy and waiting. Chapter 4. The Hall of Dust. Carter didn't move at first. His muscles locked, every nerve straining toward the chair that now sat perfectly still. He realized his own breath had synced with its rhythm. Inhale, exhale, forward, back. Now that it had stopped, he had to force air into his lungs. His instincts screamed at him to leave. Get back in the car, speed down the cracked road, and never look back. But the thought tangled with another. The diner, the pale-eyed old man, the waitress's tired warning. Not every story watches you back. If he left now, would the story follow? Carter tightened his grip on the flashlight and forced his legs to move. He stepped into the dining room again, closer to the table. Dust coated everything, soft as ash. He brushed his fingers across the wood, leaving behind streaks like scars. The chair remained motionless. Its carved legs were worn smooth, the seat cracked but sturdy. He touched the back of the chair, just a quick brush with his fingertips, and immediately pulled away. The wood was warm. He backed toward the archway that led deeper into the house. The beam of his flashlight revealed a long hallway stretching beyond the kitchen, narrow and choked with cobwebs. Doors lined either side. each one slightly ajar. The floor was carpeted in a thick layer of dust, except for a single path where the dust had been disturbed as though someone had walked through not long ago. "Anyone here?" Carter asked again, louder this time. His voice cracked against the walls and came back to him in whispers. He opened the first door on the left, a sitting room. Faded couches slumped beneath sheets, the outlines of forgotten photographs hanging crooked on the walls. He dared to lift one corner of the sheet. Beneath it, a cushion torn open, stuffing spilling like pale entrails. The next room was a study, a desk hunched beneath the window, its drawers pulled halfway out. Papers lay scattered across the floor, most too stained and brittle to read. One, however, caught his eye. A child's drawing, wax crayon scrawled in uneven lines. A house, tall and square, with windows blackened in. Beside it stood stick figures, too tall, too small, a family. And above the house, a crooked red sun. Something about the way the windows were filled in, scribbled so furiously that the paper had nearly torn, made his stomach twist. He folded the drawing and slipped it into his jacket pocket before he could think why. The hallway stretched on. Dust motes swirled in his flashlight's beam, disturbed by his passing. The silence felt heavier now, pressing down on him with every step, until even his heartbeat seemed too loud. At the far end of the hall, he found another door. Unlike the others, this one was closed tight. The knob was tarnished brass, cold against his palm. He turned it slowly, expecting resistance, but it opened smoothly into darkness. He swept the flashlight inside. A bedroom. The bed frame sagged, the mattress rotted through. Curtains hung limp, eaten by moths. On the bedside table sat another object, a mirror in a small wooden frame, its glass cracked down the center. As he lifted the mirror, the crack caught the light and split his reflection into two faces, overlapping. One was his own, the other wasn't. It was close, almost him, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the mouth curved into something that wanted to be a smile, but wasn't. Carter's stomach lurched. He dropped the mirror back on the table, and the sound rang through the house like a gunshot. From upstairs came the answer. Creak, 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 creak. The rocking chair had started again, and it was faster this time. Chapter 5. The Rocking Chair. The creaking would not stop. Steady, deliberate, like a lullaby meant for no one. Carter stood frozen in the dust-choked bedroom, staring at the cracked mirror that had nearly shown him another face. His breath clouded faintly in the beam of the flashlight, though the air wasn't cold. The house was awake now. The sound above him picked up its rhythm, rocking forward and back. He tried to tell himself it was the wind. Maybe the draft pushed the chair. Maybe some trick of settling wood made the noise seem deliberate. But the explanation felt hollow in his head. Carter forced his boots to move. Out of the room, back into the hallway, every step stirring the dust that coated the carpet like frost. He paused at the bottom of the staircase, looking up. The light barely reached the landing, leaving the upper floor in a syrupy darkness that seemed thicker than it should have been. "All right," he whispered to himself, though his throat was dry. Just wood, just a house." The stairs moaned beneath him as he climbed. Each board groaned in protest, not like wood straining, but like a voice letting out long, tired sighs. He kept the flashlight trained ahead, though he had the sickening sense that if he glanced back, he'd see something waiting at the bottom. Halfway up, the rocking stopped. The silence crashed down again, sudden and suffocating. Carter froze, heart thundering, sweat prickled along his neck. He waited, breath shallow, ears straining. Nothing. He swallowed hard and pushed onward. The landing was narrower than it had looked from below. The hallway stretched long and uneven. Wallpaper peeled in curling strips, exposing the veins of the house beneath. Doors lined both sides, all but one closed tight. That one door gaped slightly, a crooked sliver of shadow spilling across the floorboards. From within came the faintest scrape. Carter raised the flashlight. The beam slid over the threshold, illuminating the corner of a room. A rocking chair stood there, facing away, its silhouette sharp against the faded wallpaper. It moved. Forward, back, forward, back. Empty. Carter stepped closer, his boots whispering across the boards. His breath grew shallow, his pulse a heavy drum in his ears. He could see the chair more clearly now, the curve of its arms, the splintered edges of the rockers grinding faintly against the floor. The rhythm was steady, purposeful. "Who's there?" His voice cracked. "Come out." The chair rocked faster. He swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temple. He circled slowly, edging around the chair until he could see its front. The flashlight beam trembled in his grip. No one. The seat sagged with age, cushion flattened, yet the chair moved as though cradling weight. Forward, back, forward, back. Carter reached out a hand, just to stop it, just to prove something real was moving it. His fingers brushed the worn wood, and the chair froze. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, directly behind him, the floor groaned. Carter spun, light slicing the shadows. The hallway behind him was empty, but the air felt crowded, as though something unseen stood inches away, watching him with unbearable patience. The rocking chair shuddered once more, just once, and then it stopped completely. Carter stood there in the silence, chest heaving, knowing he should run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Instead, his flashlight beam slid across the room and landed on something else. A bed, small, child-sized. And beneath it, scratched deep into the floorboards, were words carved by a trembling hand. Don't stay. Chapter 6. The Stretching Stairs. The words carved into the floorboards throbbed in Carter's vision. Don't stay. His pulse beat in time with them, each letter seared into his mind. He stumbled back from the child's bed, flashlight beam jerking wildly across the room until it landed on the chair again. Still, perfectly still. His chest heaved, every nerve in his body screaming that it was time to go. Now, before the silence thickened further, before the shadows grew another inch. "All right," he muttered, voice thin. "All right, that's enough." He turned, boots pounding against the upstairs hall. The doors seemed to lean closer as he passed them, their knobs glinting like watching eyes. By the time he reached the stairs, his flashlight shook so badly the beam fractured across the railing. He started down fast. The old wood bellowed beneath his weight, every step groaning louder than the last. Halfway down, the air shifted. It pressed on him, thick, like invisible hands on his shoulders. He slowed, against his will. The bottom of the staircase looked farther than it should have been. Carter blinked hard. The first floor stretched away, warped, the rug at the base unfurling into a length that hadn't been there before. He gripped the banister, breathing fast. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not..." He descended another step. The bottom receded again, like the house was dragging the finish line farther and farther from reach. Shadows pooled at the edges of the walls, stretching long and crooked. Panic surged. He bolted, stumbling down 2 steps at a time, heartbeat roaring. The door waited. He could see it. Faint light still spilling from the world outside, salvation just beyond. He reached the final step and lunged forward, and the rug beneath his boots buckled like water. He crashed down, palms scraping wood, flashlight clattering across the floor. Its beam spun drunkenly across the entryway, illuminating walls that seemed closer than before. The front door, had it been that far away when he first entered? No. No, Carter hissed, scrambling to his feet. No! No! He staggered toward the door. His fingers reached for the knob, brushed the cold brass. And then, the house exhaled. A deep, low groan vibrated through the boards, through the walls, through Carter's bones. He froze, hand on the knob. For one wild moment, he thought he felt the metal pulse beneath his grip, like the door itself had a heartbeat. And then, behind him, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down the stairs he had just fled. He spun, chest hammering, flashlight beam jerking up the staircase. The landing above was empty, shadows sagging heavy against peeling wallpaper. But the steps kept coming, invisible weight pressing down one by one. Carter's throat locked. He yanked at the knob, twisted, shoved. The door did not move. He shoved harder, shoulder braced, but the wood held tight, wood shuddering as though resisting him. The footsteps reached the final step. Carter slammed the flashlight beam toward the sound. The stair was empty, but the next board, the one directly in front of the door, groaned under weight he couldn't see. Something was there, close. He staggered back, heart ricocheting. The door behind him rattled once, as if mocking his attempts. And then, silence. The pressure in the air lifted, faintly, just enough for Carter to breathe. He staggered, gasping, sweat dripping down his back. He couldn't tell if the house had let him go, or if it was merely waiting, stretching the game out like a cat with a cornered mouse. His flashlight flickered, dimming, then steadied. Its beam fell on the guest book that was still lying open on the kitchen table. Pages fluttered in a breathless draft. The last line was scrawled in frantic ink, almost illegible, but Carter squinted and read it aloud. The house does not trap you. It waits until you stay. And the silence that followed was deeper than before. And from upstairs, the rocking chair started again.
Chapter 7. The Guest Book. The guest book lay open like a wound. Its pages fluttered in the unseen draft, the paper yellowed and curled at the edges as if it had been breathing for decades. Carter's flashlight trembled as he approached, the beam sliding over the spidery lines of handwriting. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. The wood shrieked against the floor and the sound made his teeth ache. He sat anyway, as though some part of him wanted to meet the house on its terms. The first entries were polite, ordinary. Dated from decades past, the neat script described summer visits, evenings by a fire, mornings filled with sunlight. Beautiful home. Thank you for your kindness. Names he didn't recognize signed each note, their ink faded but still legible. Then the handwriting changed. Midway through, the entries grew hurried, lines bent, words smudged, sentences unfinished. Strange noises last night. Thought it was the wind. Doors won't stay shut. They open again when I turn away. Something walked the hall. I heard it stop outside my room. I pretended to sleep. Carter swallowed, throat dry. His eyes tracked further down the page. It watches us eat. I don't know how, but it does. Don't look in the mirrors. The last 3 pages were smeared with scratches, as though someone had dragged their pen across again and again until the tip broke. But in between the lines of ruined ink, Carter caught fragments. Won't let us leave. Stairs keep changing. It rocks when I close my eyes. He turned the page, palms damp. More entries, some dated years apart, others only days. A handful of names returned more than once, as if their owners had come back despite themselves. And then, near the back of the book, the handwriting sharpened. Large, desperate letters gouged into the paper. I think it likes me. It doesn't want me to go. I hear it in the walls. It's learning my voice. The next page was torn out entirely. Only the ragged edge of paper remained, stiffened and blackened as though burned. Carter sat rigid, fingers gripping the brittle edges of the book. His breath came shallow, each inhale stirring the dust that floated lazily in the beam of his flashlight. For a moment, he considered adding his own line, something small. Stopped here, noticed the chair, leaving now. A mark to prove he had been here and survived. But when he reached for the pen resting in the spine, his hand froze. The pen was warm, as if someone had just put it down. Carter dropped it instantly, the clatter loud as a gunshot. He staggered back, chair toppling behind him, heart hammering. The silence that followed was too heavy, like the house holding its breath. Then came the scratching. Not on paper, on wood. The sound crawled from the walls around him, nails dragging, rising, and falling in rhythm. It circled him, moving through the paneling, the floorboards, the ceiling, a chorus of clawing, as though the house itself was trying to write its own words into its bones. Carter snatched the guest book from the table and shoved it into his jacket, though he couldn't explain why. Proof, maybe, or a tether, something that might remind him this was real. The scratching ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The silence rolled back in. And in the distance, faint but clear, came a whisper that wasn't his. Don't stay.
Chapter 9. The Locked Room. The hallway seemed longer than it had moments before. Carter's flashlight flickered, sending shadows skittering across peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards. Each step made the dust rise like smoke, and the whispers followed him, brushing against the back of his neck, murmuring his name in voices that were almost, but not quite, human. At the far end of the hall, a door stood out. Unlike the others, it was tightly closed, smooth and unbroken, its brass doorknob darkened with age. It seemed newer than the rest of the house, or perhaps simply untouched. But something about it made the air thrum differently. It radiated a weight, pressing on his chest like a hand demanding attention. Carter stopped. He hesitated. His hand hovered over the knob, skin prickling. The whispers seemed to hush, as though the house itself was holding its breath. "Hello?" he called softly. No answer. Only the faintest groan from upstairs, the rocking chair moving in slow, deliberate rhythm. He grasped the knob and turned. Nothing. The door didn't budge. He tried again, shaking it, pulling with all his strength. Solid, immovable. A shiver ran down his spine. The house sighed around him, the creak of floorboards, the subtle shift of the walls, the air thick with the scent of old wood and something sweet, metallic. Carter stepped back. He ran a hand along the doorframe. Something scratched against his fingers. Not the paint, not the wood. It was finer, deliberate. Fingernail marks,
deep and jagged, like something had been clawing from the other side. "Who's there?" he whispered. His own voice sounded small, swallowed by the hallway. The door rattled, faintly, just once, as if replying. A shiver ran through him. He looked around. The walls themselves seemed to bend slightly, subtle curves he hadn't noticed before. The hallway stretched a fraction longer, narrowing as if the house was pushing him closer to the locked door. Carter tried to peer beneath it. The gap between the floor and the doorframe was narrow, but he thought he saw a faint movement, a shadow flitting just out of reach, impossible to identify. Then the whispers returned, louder, overlapping in a crescendo. "Stay. Don't leave. Come closer." He stumbled back. The rocking chair upstairs groaned in response, almost as if it were mimicking the rhythm of the whispers. Desperate, he tried the door one last time, slamming his shoulder against it. The house shivered, responding to his force. The doorknob rattled. The scratches deepened, as if whatever was inside the room had shifted, pressing closer to the surface. Carter stepped back, breath ragged, heart hammering. He realized something terrifying. The house didn't need to open the door to hold him. It had him. Every step, every sound, every thought, it knew. It could reach him without the door moving at all. The rocking chair stopped abruptly upstairs. Silence swallowed the hallway, pressing down on him, thick and patient. Then, faintly, from behind the door, came the sound of something sliding against the floor. Not wood, not metal. Something softer, slow, deliberate. Carter's hands shook as he gripped the guest book in his jacket pocket. He couldn't leave it. Not now. Not with the house watching, whispering, breathing around him. A voice, faint and wet, hissed from the keyhole. "We've been waiting." And in that moment, he knew the house had been waiting for him long before he arrived.
Chapter 10. The Mirror That Watches. Carter moved slowly down the hall, leaving the locked room behind. The whispers lingered in the air like smoke, curling around him, brushing against his ears with soft insistence. The house had shifted subtly again. The floorboards no longer felt straight, the walls slightly leaning, bending inward. At the end of the hall, a bedroom door stood half open. Light from the flashlight falling across a small mirror mounted on the wall beside it. Its frame was wooden, simple, cracked at the corners. He remembered glimpsing it briefly from the staircase landing, but now it seemed different, closer, sharper, more deliberate. Carter hesitated. His reflection stared back at him, pale and drawn in the dim beam. But as he blinked, he saw it shift. His eyes, his mouth, same, yet wrong. A faint smile curved along the lips that were his own, slow and deliberate, almost patient. He stepped closer. The reflection mirrored him at first, then began to lag behind his movements by a fraction of a second, twitching when he did not, tilting its head when he stayed still. His own hands rose, but the reflection's hands moved differently, curling into claws at the edges. Carter stumbled back, heart hammering. What are you?" he whispered. The reflection leaned closer, pressed against the glass as if it wanted to step out. Its eyes were darker than his own, the irises almost black, absorbing the flashlight's glow. A faint hiss slipped from the mirror, though no lips moved. "Come." His knees shook. He could hear the whispers again, louder now, crawling along the edges of the hallway, pressing against the back of his neck. The rocking chair upstairs began again, slow, steady, counting the seconds like a heartbeat. Carter's flashlight beam jittered across the room. Behind him, shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, curling at impossible angles. His reflection moved again, perfectly in sync this time, but only just enough to make him doubt his own motions. He reached for the mirror. Just to touch it, just to confirm that the cold glass was solid. The moment his fingertips brushed the surface, the glass rippled. His reflection smiled fully now, an expression alien and cruel. The whispers coalesced into a single thought pressing in his skull. "Stay with us." He pulled back, tripping over a loose floorboard. Dust rose, swirling like smoke, carrying the faint metallic tang that had followed him since the entryway. The mirror caught the light, splitting his reflection into 2, 3, dozens of overlapping faces, each one grinning, each one waiting. Carter staggered to his feet, heartbeat loud, pulse racing. He wanted to flee. The door at the end of the hallway beckoned, a promise of escape. But as he stepped toward it, the floor stretched beneath him again, elongating the hallway, twisting the space subtly. The mirror called him, silently, insistently, each reflection reaching out with hands of pale light. "Stay. Forever. Join us." Carter backed away, almost falling against the wall. His flashlight shook in his grip. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the hallway had lengthened again. The walls leaned inward, closing the space. And above all, the rocking chair had ceased, replaced by silence so deep it seemed alive, pressing down on him from every direction. He realized something terrifying. The house didn't just want him to stay, it wanted him to see, to watch, to become part of the rooms, the walls, the wallpaper, the shadows. And the reflection, the other him, smiled wider.
Chapter 11. The attic breathed. Carter climbed the narrow stairs that led to the attic, each step groaning under his weight. Dust rose in lazy spirals around his boots, and the air grew thicker with every flight. Upstairs, the house seemed quieter, but it was the kind of quiet that pressed down on the chest, heavy and patient. The door at the top was small, worn, and crooked on its hinges. A weak beam of flashlight lit the gap beneath it, and faintly he could see the shadows inside stretching and curling, even though the room was still. With a trembling hand, he pushed the door open. It groaned like a deep sigh, a sound almost human in its resonance. Inside, the attic was cavernous and low-ceilinged, filled with the remnants of forgotten lives, trunks, crates, chairs stacked in unstable towers. Dust motes floated in the beam, suspended as if time had stopped. Carter stepped inside. The air smelled stronger here, sweet and metallic, tinged with old wood and something sharper, like the scent of old blood. His flashlight beam swept the room, catching the jagged edges of floorboards, the frayed ropes of a hanging lamp, the warped panels of the walls. Then he noticed it. The floor beneath his feet moved. Not under his weight, but as if the house were breathing. The boards rose subtly, then fell slow and deliberate. The walls seemed to pulse, leaning closer and then receding, as though inhaling and exhaling around him. He swallowed hard. The rocking chair's rhythm from downstairs had been replaced by a low, almost imperceptible thrum, the heartbeat of the house itself. Each pulse reverberated through the attic floor and into his bones. Something shifted in the shadows. A trunk lid slowly creaked, tilting upward on its own. Dust swirled, lifting like smoke as if stirred by unseen fingers. Carter raised his flashlight, swinging it toward the movement. The trunk was empty, yet he felt eyes on him, dozens of unseen gazes. "Welcome." The whisper was faint at first, then multiplied. The attic walls themselves seemed to murmur, voices pressing in from the corners, from the floorboards, from behind the stacked crates. They spoke in unison and in whispers, the voices of all who had come before. Carter stumbled backward, heart hammering. He tried to retreat towards the stairs, but the attic stretched subtly. What had seemed only a few steps now felt like dozens. Every turn of the head revealed another shadowy figure, crouched in corners or behind stacks of forgotten furniture. They didn't move directly at him, but they watched. His flashlight flickered, dimming as the attic seemed to close in. From above, the ceiling beams groaned and the walls whispered together. The house was alive in a way he hadn't understood before. Not just watching, not just waiting. It breathed, pulsed, and remembered. Carter's gaze fell on a small round mirror propped against a crate. Unlike the one downstairs, this mirror reflected nothing but the attic itself, except for a single figure standing behind him. Pale, too tall, the eyes dark, patient. When he turned, the space was empty. The whispers coalesced, a tide of sound pressing into his skull. "Join us. Stay. Forever." The attic floor pulsed once more beneath him, strong and deliberate. The house inhaled around him, walls bending subtly toward his body. Carter realized with terror that he could not run. Not yet, while the house wanted him to see, to understand, to become part of its memory. And somewhere, in the deepest corner of the attic, he felt the slow creak of another rocking chair moving of its own accord, steady, deliberate, waiting for him to finally sit. The house had been alive long before him, and it would be alive long after. Chapter 12. The Whispering Rooms. Carter's leg shook as he descended from the attic, careful to place each foot on the warped stairs. The house seemed to hum beneath him, the floorboards vibrating faintly, carrying a pulse that matched his racing heartbeat. Each step carried him deeper into the waiting folds of the house, where shadows clung thickly and dust swirled like smoke in the narrow beams of his flashlight. The hallway stretched endlessly before him, longer than he remembered. Doors lined both sides, each one slightly ajar, faint whispers curling out from the dark. They spoke not in words, but in thoughts, memories that weren't his, feelings he didn't recognize. The house was teaching him its language. Come, stay, see. Carter stopped before the first door on the left. The whispers were louder here, insistent, almost pleading. His flashlight revealed a small parlor, its furniture shrouded in yellowed sheets. When he lifted one corner of the couch cover, the cushions beneath were indented, like someone had been sitting there recently. A soft voice, impossibly close, whispered in his ear, "Sit with us." He jerked back. The sound came from nowhere. The air itself seemed to carry it, curling around his mind, pressing against his thoughts. Panic rose in his chest.
yet a small, dangerous part of him wanted to obey. The next room, a dining room, held a long table. Dusty silverware lay scattered across it, but the chairs had moved, each one tilted slightly inward, as though facing him. The whispers here were louder, overlapping, urgent. "See the walls. Remember. Join us." Carter swallowed hard. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the voices, their peeling wallpaper twisting into shapes that resembled faces. He blinked, and they shifted again. Children, adults, all pale, silent, staring. From down the hall came the creak of the rocking chair, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat keeping time with the wall's whispers. He realized the rooms themselves were alive, each carrying the echoes of those who had come before. Each step he took was noted, recorded in the house's memory. He turned another corner, and the hallway twisted. Rooms he hadn't seen before appeared. A study, its desk covered in papers scrawled with names. A bedroom with the faint smell of something sweet and metallic. Another room with a mirror reflecting not him, but a shadowy figure standing behind him, gone when he turned. The whispers pressed more insistently now, threading into his thoughts, shaping them. "Stay. Forever. Don't leave." Carter shook his head, trying to clear the intrusion, but the house was patient. The longer he stayed, the more it fed on his attention, bending his perception of distance, of space, of reality. The doors closed slightly as he passed, narrowing the hall, elongating the shadows. The house was learning him, cataloging every fear, every hesitation. At the far end of the hallway, a door stood partially open. Through it he glimpsed darkness deeper than any shadow he had yet seen. The whisper swelled in a final urgent chorus. "Come, sit, stay, see, remember." Carter's legs trembled. His flashlight flickered, the shadows dancing wildly across the walls, echoing the movement of the chair upstairs. Every instinct screamed to leave, to run from the house that was alive, breathing, waiting, watching. But another part of him, small and curious, urged him forward. The house was patient, and it always got what it wanted. Chapter 13. The Hall of Faces. Carter stepped through the door at the end of the hallway and froze. The room stretched before him, impossibly wide, its walls lined with frames of every size, each holding a face. Some faces were photographs, pale and cracked with age. Some were painted in oils, eyes glimmering with uncanny life. Others were carved or etched, expression frozen, mouths open in silent screams or wide, unnatural smiles. The air smelled sweet and metallic, a scent that made his stomach twist. Dust floated thickly, swirling in the flashlight's beam, revealing figures crouched in corners, silent and still, watching. The whispers followed him here, soft at first, then rising into a chorus. We saw, we stayed, we watched. Carter's heart thudded. The faces seemed to move when he blinked, turning slightly to follow him, eyes glinting with awareness. He realized, with a chill crawling up his spine, that this was the house's memory. Every soul who had stayed, every visitor who had entered and not escaped was here, trapped in some form, preserved by the house. A small cracked frame on the far wall caught his attention. A young child, no more than 7, eyes wide with terror. Carter felt an almost magnetic pull toward it, as if the child were reaching out for help. The whispers sharpened. Join us. Stay. Forever. He stumbled back, heart racing. Shadows gathered at the corners, elongating, reaching out with impossible length. The floor beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat, each vibration matching the whisper's rhythm. The rocking chair upstairs groaned in slow, deliberate cadence. Carter's flashlight flickered, revealing more faces, dozens, hundreds, each one frozen in the act of seeing him. Some screaming silently, some smiling cruelly. He realized that the house didn't just remember them, it had shaped them, twisted their presence into the walls, the frames, the shadows. A whisper directly behind him made him spin around. The hallway was empty, yet the voice was inside his skull, not outside. We are here, waiting, learning, seeing. Carter pressed himself against the nearest wall, hands trembling. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Every instinct screamed to run, but the house had already begun reshaping his perception. The door he had entered through seemed farther than before, the hall behind him stretching like taffy. He turned back to the faces. One of them, the child, was no longer just painted on the wall. The eyes blinked, the mouth opened, forming a wordless scream that pressed directly against Carter's mind. Stay. The whispering rose to a roar. Faces twisted, eyes widening impossibly, mouths opening and closing as if speaking in unison. Shadows coiled from the corners, stretching toward him, brushing his shoulders, tugging at his jacket. Carter's flashlight fell on a small plaque beneath the frames. Names. Hundreds of them, etched in tight script, some scratched out, some overwritten. Each one corresponded to a face above. And the last line, fresh and dark, read, Carter, you belong next. His legs gave way. He stumbled backward, falling against the wall, the weight of hundreds of watching eyes pressing down on him. The whispers became words now, clear and sharp. Stay. Forever. Join us. See. Remember. Carter's chest heaved. The room pulsed, breathed, and seemed to draw him in. He realized, with icy clarity, that the house didn't just trap bodies. It trapped minds, wills, souls. Every visitor was catalogued, preserved, remembered. And now, it had chosen him. Above, the rocking chair creaked once, then stopped. Silence filled the room, heavy and patient. He knew it was waiting for him to make a choice. Stay or lose himself to the house entirely.
Chapter 14. The Echoing Footsteps. Carter stumbled back from the Hall of Faces, his mind reeling. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows coiling as if the house were alive, breathing, stretching. He felt the weight of the hundreds of eyes on him pressing into his chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hallway ahead had lengthened again. The staircase he had climbed earlier now seemed farther than memory allowed. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Not his own, not upstairs, but behind him, soft, deliberate, echoing through the house with unnatural precision. Each step measured, in rhythm with his own heartbeat, yet impossibly separate. He spun, flashlight beam slicing the air, but the hallway behind him stretched empty. The footsteps grew louder, circling. They weren't above, below, or beside him. They were everywhere at once, resonating through the walls, the floor, even the air. Carter's stomach dropped. The house didn't just watch him, it followed him. It moved for him, around him, reshaping itself to keep him inside. He ran, stumbling over warped boards, flashlight flickering, shadows crawling along the walls, lengthening unnaturally. Doors appeared where none had been, disappearing where they should have been. The hallways twisted subtly, elongating with every desperate step. The stairs he tried to descend seemed to rise into infinity, curving impossibly toward the attic once more. Stay! The whisper curled through his mind, overlapping with the echoing footsteps. Carter's breathing became ragged, every exhale loud against the walls. He swung the flashlight wildly, catching glimpses of shadows moving independently of the light. Figures crouched in corners, peeking from behind doors, faces pressed into the peeling wallpaper. All of them, watching, waiting. He reached the dining room, heart hammering. Chairs that had been lined neatly were now scattered, tilting inward as if leaning toward him. The table stretched impossibly long, groaning under some invisible weight. And then the footsteps converged, sounding directly behind him, each echo reverberating inside his skull. He whirled. Nothing. Just walls. Empty space. But the floor beneath his feet shifted. Boards rippled like water. The door to the entryway, his only hope of escape, receded, moving farther into the shadows. Forever. He tried to call out, scream, plead. Nothing escaped his throat. Only the echoes answered him. They weren't his own footsteps anymore. They were the footsteps of everyone who had come before him. Each step a memory trapped, walking endlessly in a rhythm the house controlled. He stumbled back, flashlight beam swinging, catching glimpses of a rocking chair in the hallway, moving slowly, deliberately, in time with the invisible march of echoes. Dust swirled in the beam like smoke, curling around him, forming faces that whispered his name. Carter realized the terrifying truth. The house could reach him wherever he went. It could manipulate space, distance, walls and floors. Every escape attempt, every turn, every step was catalogued. Every fear he felt became part of the house itself. The footsteps grew louder, converging, circling. Carter's legs gave way. He fell to the floor, forehead pressed to warped boards, breath shallow, mind reeling. The whispering rose to a chorus, pressing into his skull from every direction. Join us! Stay! Forever! Above him, the rocking chair ceased, silence falling suddenly, thick and heavy. Carter knew, with a cold certainty, that the house wasn't done. It had been waiting. It would wait until he finally became part of it.
Chapter 15. The Window That Never Led Outside. Carter scrambled toward the nearest window, desperation fueling his legs. The hall of faces and the echoing footsteps still haunted him, each step heavier, each shadow curling closer. He threw open the window, expecting night air, a chance to leap and run into freedom. But the pain didn't reveal the world outside. Instead, the landscape beyond shimmered, warped. Trees stretched impossibly tall, their branches curling into spirals like black smoke. The moon hovered too close, pale and enormous, casting light that twisted across the warped ground. When he tried to climb through, his hand slipped against the sill, and the view shifted, a subtle movement that made him feel dizzy and nauseated. He backed away. Another window, same result. Every frame showed night, twisted, unnatural, unwelcoming. Nothing familiar. No road, no town, no stars. Only the house's vision of the world outside, manipulated, reshaped, hostile. The whispers grew again, pressing into his mind. There is no outside. There is only us. Stay. Carter's flashlight flickered, the beam slicing across the warped walls. Shadows clung more tightly, stretching along the floor, along the peeling wallpaper, coiling around corners where no wall should have existed. The house's pulse thrummed beneath his feet, echoing the rhythm of the rocking chair he could still hear, faintly, somewhere above. He tried to ignore the windows, tried to focus on the door, the stairs, any path that might lead out. But the house was bending reality around him. Doors shifted, hallways curved, distances elongated and shortened with subtle cruelty. Every escape route led him back into the same hallway, the same watching shadows, the same pulse of the floorboards. He pressed his hand against one window, then another. The glass was cold, smooth, and unyielding.
Behind the panes, the warped night pressed toward him, alive with subtle movement. Trees bent slightly as if breathing. Shadows slid across the distorted ground, crawling toward him. He staggered back, heart hammering. The whispers became urgent, insistent, circling his mind. Join us, forever, see, stay. Then from above, the rocking chair groaned once, slowly, deliberately. Its rhythm synced with the pulse of the floor and the whispering voices. The house exhaled. Carter realized the terrifying truth. The house didn't just trap him inside its walls, it trapped him inside its perception. Every window, every door, every hallway could be twisted. Every attempt to escape was already anticipated, already reshaped to feed the house. He sank to the floor, flashlight shaking in his hands, dust swirling in the beam like smoke. The shadows along the walls leaned closer, the faces in frames flickering, stretching, whispering. We have always been waiting, and now you are part of us. The night outside the windows remained still, warped, eternal. Carter knew, with chilling clarity, that the house had never intended to let him leave. The world beyond was only a reflection of its own will, and he was trapped inside the living memory of the house. Above him, the rocking chair stopped. Silence pressed down. The house waited, patient, eternal.
Did you enjoy that short story? I hope you found it spooky. Now, time for another tale.
The House That Breathed. Chapter 1. The Dare. It started with a dare, the kind that doesn't feel like a choice once it's spoken aloud. "You won't last the night in there," Caleb had said, his voice carrying easily over the bonfire crackle. He grinned in that way that dared you to prove him wrong, his marshmallow blackened and forgotten at the end of his stick. The others leaned closer to the flames, shadows flickering across their faces. They'd all heard the same stories growing up, how the old Kessler house was alive, how people who spent a night there woke different, quieter, hollow-eyed, as though some part of them had been drawn into the walls. "You mean the house that breathes," Marcy snorted, though she wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Come on, that's just what bored kids say when they hear a draft under the floorboards." "Drafts don't whisper," Caleb replied. His eyes shifted to you, then lingered, waiting. The group followed his gaze. You felt their attention like heat against your skin, and suddenly every excuse you might have made dried up in your throat. You weren't the bravest among them, but neither were you the sort who backed down when challenged. "You're saying I couldn't do it?" you asked. "I'm saying nobody has." Caleb's grin widened. "Not all the way through the night, not alone. If you can, you get bragging rights forever." The fire popped. Somewhere in the dark field beyond, a cricket fell silent. Marcy shook her head. "It's a stupid dare. That place is falling apart. You'll break a leg on rotten stairs before anything spooky gets you." "Then what's there to be scared of?" Caleb countered. Their laughter rose and fell around you, a tide of teasing voices. But beneath it, you felt the current of something heavier, the unspoken weight of generations of rumors. People swore the Kessler place moved at night, its walls swelling like lungs, its halls humming with voices too low to catch. No one remembered the last person who lived there. Some claimed the house itself had swallowed them whole. You should have laughed it off. Instead, you heard yourself say, "Fine, I'll do it." The group erupted in cheers and jeers. Caleb clapped you on the back hard enough to sting. That's the spirit.
We'll drop you off tomorrow evening. Just you, the house, and however many ghosts live in the wallpaper." Marcy frowned, her eyes catching yours across the firelight. "Don't," she mouthed silently, the word lost under the laughter. Her expression wasn't mocking, but afraid. The rest of the night passed in fragments, stories told too loudly, flames burning low, the sharp taste of smoke in your throat. But beneath it all, the decision lodged in your chest like a stone. When the fire burned to embers and the others drifted home, you found yourself staring out toward the dark rise of the hill where the Kessler house sat. Its silhouette was just visible against the stars, windows blank and waiting. You told yourself you didn't believe the stories, but as the last ember hissed out, you thought you heard something, distant, carried on the still air. A long, slow inhale. The sound of something waiting for you to arrive.
The first night. The house loomed larger up close, its roofline jagged against the fading light like broken teeth. The drive up had been quiet. Caleb and Marcy dropped you at the gate just before dusk, their car idling a moment too long before Caleb muttered, "See you in the morning, if you make it." He laughed, but it sounded thinner than usual. Marcy didn't laugh. She didn't even look at you as the car pulled away. The iron gate squealed when you pushed it open. Beyond it, the path was little more than gravel choked with weeds, leading to a porch sagging under its own weight. The front door tilted slightly in its frame, paint stripped down to bare wood. You hesitated at the bottom step, your bag heavy on your shoulder. "Just wood," you whispered to yourself. "Just a house." The floorboards groaned when you stepped inside. The air was colder than you expected, thick with dust and the faint scent of mildew. You flicked on your flashlight, its narrow beam cutting through the gloom. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips, curling down like old parchment. A grandfather clock stood in the hallway, its glass shattered, its hands frozen at 3:17. You set your bag down in a small room off the main hall. The bed was narrow, frame rusted, mattress sagging like it had been waiting centuries for weight to return. You didn't sit on it yet. Instead, you wandered. The house seemed endless inside. Rooms opened into rooms, doorways yawning into dark spaces where your flashlight barely reached. You passed through a dining room where the table was still set, plates rimmed with dust, silverware tarnished green. In the parlor, a piano sat with its lid up, keys yellowed and cracked, though the sheet music on its stand hadn't crumbled completely. Everywhere there was silence. No birds outside, no insects buzzing. Just silence, until you began to notice it, a faint rhythm under the quiet. At first, you thought it was your own heartbeat, your own breath echoing too loudly in your ears. But as you stood still in the hallway, you realized it was the house. The wooden beams seemed to strain upward, expanding with a deep inhale. The walls creaked, sagging slightly, releasing with a long exhale. You stepped closer to the wall, laying your palm against the faded wallpaper. The surface was cool and faintly trembling, as though something vast stirred inside. A draft, you told yourself, just a draft. But when you pressed your ear to the wall, the sound shifted. Beneath the creak of timber came a murmur, a hushed cadence, like voices in another room. You couldn't make out the words. You weren't sure you wanted to. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. You pulled away from the wall and forced yourself back into the small room. The bed groaned when you finally lowered yourself onto it, dust rising in a faint cloud. You left the flashlight burning beside you, its beam aimed at the ceiling. Shadows gathered in the corners, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the house's breath. You pulled the blanket tight and shut your eyes. For a time, you thought you might actually sleep. Then, the mattress shifted. Slowly, gradually, as though someone had lain down beside you. You froze, every muscle locked. You didn't dare open your eyes. You didn't dare breathe. The air at your cheek stirred, cold and damp. A whisper slid against your skin, so close it felt born from the pillow itself. It said, your name. Your eyes snapped open to the dark ceiling, the flashlight beam now trembling as though gripped by unseen hands. And from the wall came another long inhale. The house was not empty.
Chapter 3. Settling in. Morning came gray and reluctant, light squeezing through the warped shutters in thin, crooked stripes. You hadn't truly slept. Your eyes had shut, yes, but every sound, the sigh of the beams, the shift of the mattress, the occasional whisper brushing against your name, pulled you back from the edge of rest. When you finally sat up, the bed groaned again, this time under only your weight. The other dip in the mattress had vanished. Dust clung to your clothes. You stretched, rubbing your eyes, and muttered, "Just nerves, just the house settling." The words sounded too small in the empty room. You decided to explore in daylight, telling yourself it would prove there was nothing here. With the flashlight clipped to your belt, you stepped into the hallway. The silence pressed in from all sides. No birdsong outside, no hum of insects. The house seemed to exist in a pocket cut off from the rest of the world. The dining room looked worse in the light. The table was coated in a thick film of dust, but the plates and utensils were still neatly arranged, as though a family had once been called to dinner and simply never arrived. You touched the rim of a plate. It shifted slightly under your finger, leaving a faint ring in the dust. In the parlor, the piano caught your attention again. The sheet music on the stand was yellowed, the notes still legible. Nocturne in E minor. You pressed a single key. The sound that rose wasn't quite right, too sharp, too hollow, but it was sound, and in the silence of the house it seemed deafening. The floor above your head answered with a creak. You froze, hand hovering over the keys. The creak came again. 2 slow steps. Then nothing. Wood expanding, you whispered to yourself, though the words trembled. The kitchen was worse. Rust ate through the sink basin, and the stove was choked with ashes long cold. A kettle sat on one of the burners, blackened and cracked. You bent to look closer and saw something scratched into the enamel of the stovetop, faint but deliberate. Leave before it learns you. The letters trailed off at the end, as if whoever carved them had been dragged away mid-stroke. You stumbled back, nearly tripping over the doorframe. Your flashlight beam wavered over the walls, revealing nothing but more peeling wallpaper, water stains like spreading bruises. In the pantry, you found jars of preserves so old the contents had turned black, lids rusted shut. A child's shoe sat on the shelf beside them, too small, too clean compared to everything else, as though it had been placed there recently. The upstairs hallway was worse than you expected, long, narrow, lined with doors. The carpet runner had rotted to threads, but when you stepped onto it, you swore it gave slightly, like flesh instead of fabric. You forced yourself down the corridor, opening each door. A bedroom with wallpaper patterned in faded stars. A sewing room with the machine still threaded, needle halfway through a scrap of fabric. A bathroom where the mirror was cracked into a spiderweb pattern, yet in the shards, your reflection seemed delayed. You lifted your hand, and in one sliver of glass, your reflection's hand lifted a moment later. By the time you returned downstairs, your chest felt tight, as though you had been holding your breath for hours. The grandfather clock in the hallway stood silent, its hands still locked at 3:17. But as you passed it, you heard a faint ticking. Not steady, not rhythmic,
Just once, a hollow tick, then silence. You backed into your small room and closed the door. Your phone, when you pulled it out, showed no signal, not even a flicker of a bar. You tapped out a message to Marcy anyway, thumbs trembling. Still alive, just a house, right? The message sat unsent. And from somewhere deep in the walls, the house exhaled, slow and heavy, as though sighing at your denial.
The second night. By evening, the house felt heavier, not just in its silence, but in the way it seemed to lean inward, its very walls sagging as though listening. You had spent the day exploring, keeping your fear buried beneath a thin layer of logic, drafts, rot, old foundations. But the scratches on the stove, the reflection in the bathroom mirror, the phantom steps above, those lingered, circling your thoughts like crows. The sun dipped behind the trees, and with it, your courage. Shadows stretched across the hallways like dark water flooding the floors. You retreated to your small room, flashlight clutched in your hand, your bag pressed against the bed as if proximity alone could keep you safe. Your phone still showed no signal. The message to Marcy still hadn't sent. You tried again, lifting the phone, walking slowly around the room, near the window, near the bed. Still nothing. At one point, the screen flickered. Not the kind of flicker that comes from low battery, but as though someone's fingers had brushed the inside of the glass. For a moment, a single bar appeared. You typed fast. Come back, not a joke, feels wrong. But before you hit send, the bar vanished. Dead air again. Darkness gathered quickly. The flashlight beam cut a small, weak circle, every corner beyond it swelling with shadow. You laid down, but sleep did not come easily. Your ears strained at every creak, every sigh of the boards. And then, sometime past midnight, it began again. The mattress shifted. Slowly, gradually, a weight pressing down at the far side, making the springs groan as though another body had eased into place beside you. You turned sharply, flashlight in hand, but the beam struck only dust and the curve of the pillow. No one. You swallowed hard. It's just... Before you could finish, breath stirred against your ear. Cold, wet, impossibly close. A whisper followed, the same voice you had heard through the walls the night before, but clearer now. Don't worry, I'll keep breathing for you. You jolted upright, the flashlight quivering in your hand. The room was empty, but the air pulsed. The shadows along the wall shifted as though carried on an invisible tide, rising with a slow inhale, sinking with an exhale. No, you said aloud, though your voice broke. No, it's just a house. The reply came instantly, low and soft, from everywhere at once. Not just a house, home. The walls swelled outward, wood groaning like ribs strained to their limit. The floor beneath you trembled faintly, like something vast was stirring underneath. You stumbled back, pressing against the door. The knob was cold under your hand, but when you tried to turn it, it refused. Locked. You hadn't locked it. The whisper rose again, curling through the room, threading into your ears. I've been here all along, before you, before them. I know your breath. I know your name. Shut up, you shouted, though your voice cracked in the silence. The shadows recoiled slightly, as though savoring the panic in your words. Then they pulsed again, keeping rhythm with your heaving breaths. Inhale, exhale, until you realized the house wasn't just breathing anymore. It was breathing with you. Every rise of your chest was echoed in the groan of the beams, every gasp matched by the walls expanding. Your lungs no longer felt like your own. They felt tethered, bound to something larger.
And when you tried to hold your breath, the house inhaled for you, stretching, creaking, sighing. It would not let you stop.
Chapter 5. The Diary. When dawn finally arrived, it felt less like morning and more like a reprieve, a stay of execution. The pale light seeped reluctantly into the small room, gray and weak, barely piercing the heavy curtains. You hadn't slept, not really. Every time your eyes shut, you felt it. The pull of the house, the weight in the mattress beside you, the rhythm of your own breath caught in its cycle. You'd sit up, gasping, only to find the air stale and still. At some point, exhaustion dulled your fear enough for you to drift into a shallow doze, and that was when you dreamed. Not of the house exactly, but of corridors that bent and bent without ending, of walls that pulsed like veins, of a voice whispering your name until you no longer knew if it was calling you into the house or out of yourself. When you woke, your throat ached. You forced yourself up, determined to look for proof, something tangible to make sense of the night. The silence was heavier than before, the kind that presses into your ears, making your own pulse sound too loud. You explored again, keeping your hand against the wall as though that thin contact could anchor you. The wallpaper flaked under your touch, leaving pale smears of dust. It was in the upstairs study that you found it, a narrow room with tall shelves, most sagging under the weight of mold-bloomed books. Papers littered the desk, curled with damp. At first, you thought it was useless, just another collection of ruined pages. Then you noticed the journal. Its leather cover was cracked, the strap brittle. Inside, the pages were stiff, but the ink still legible, scrawled in a hurried, uneven hand. You sat at the desk and began to read. March 2nd, 1911. The house listens. I hear it when I sleep. At first, it was the walls that sighed, but now I think it is closer. Beneath the bed, behind the mirror. It whispers, and when I do not answer, it waits. You flipped forward, pages yellowing under your fingers. March 19th. It has learned my name. Not from neighbors, for there are none left. It pulled it from me in sleep. It pulled other things too. I woke weak, short of breath, but the house was strong. Its beams stretched and groaned as though they were ribs. Another page, the ink blotted darker as though written in haste. April 3rd. I tried to leave. The doors closed. The windows opened onto walls, not sky. The house will not let me. It does not want visitors. It wants tenants. Lungs, blood, breath. You turned to the final entry, written shakily, the words slanting toward the page's edge. April 17th. It says it will keep breathing for me, that I will never run out of air if I stay. I think it already has. My chest rises when I do not ask it to. My hands shake when I try to be still. I am afraid that when I stop writing, the words will not stop. It will keep writing for me. It will keep living for me. The ending ended in a jagged line, pen dragged across the page as though ripped away. You sat back, stomach cold. The air in the study felt thin, as if stolen. A noise stirred then, soft, almost polite. You turned toward the corner. The bookshelf creaked, swayed slightly. Something shifted behind it. A whisper, muffled by wood. Your name. You stumbled from the study, slamming the door behind you. In the hallway, your phone buzzed. For the first time since you arrived, a message came through. Not from Marcy, not from Caleb, but from an unknown number. You unlocked the screen with trembling hands. The message was only 2 words. Keep breathing. Chapter 6. Shadows in the Hall. You didn't go back into the study. The journal lay where you had left it, though you could almost feel its words pressing through the door, pushing against your thoughts. Keep breathing. The phrase stuck in your mind like a splinter, repeating with every inhale, every exhale. The hallway seemed longer now, narrower. The wallpaper curled inward, as if it were shrinking, drawing the corridor tighter. The windows let in only a weak, gray light, though you swore you had seen sunlight when you first arrived. You told yourself you'd wait until morning and leave. Dare or no dare, Caleb could laugh all he wanted. But a gnawing certainty rose with the thought. The doors wouldn't open. The journal hadn't been exaggeration. To test yourself, you went downstairs. The front door was heavy, its brass knob cold against your palm. You twisted hard. It turned, yes, but when you pulled, the door didn't move, not even a shudder. You pushed with your shoulder until pain sparked in the bone, but the wood might as well have been stone. The house exhaled softly behind you, boards sighing like someone amused. You turned sharply. For a moment, you thought you saw it, something moving in the far hallway. A figure, a shape darker than shadow, gliding silently across the wall. Your breath caught. Who's there? No answer. But when you lifted the flashlight, its beam landed on the wall at the end of the hall. There, stretched tall and wrong, was a shadow that didn't belong to you. Its head cocked at a slight angle, its arms longer than they should have been. It stood perfectly still. The light flickered. When it steadied, the shadow was gone. You stumbled back into your room, chest tight. The mattress waited, sagging. You didn't lie down. Instead, you sat against the wall, flashlight balanced on your knees, phone in your hand. You tried Marcy again. Please answer, not funny anymore. The message failed to send. You tried calling. The line rang once, then cut to static. In the static, you thought you heard a voice, low, warped. Go. The phone went dark. That was when you heard it again. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. You clenched the flashlight tighter, forcing yourself to step into the hall. The stairs groaned as you climbed, every sound magnified in the silence. At the top, the corridor stretched before you, lined with closed doors. The air smelled faintly of rot and something sour, like old breath caught in fabric. You turned the flashlight. For a moment, the beam caught movement, something slipping into the star-patterned bedroom you had seen before. You pushed the door open. The room was still. The wallpaper hung in tatters, stars faded to pale gray. The bed was small, frame rusted, sheets long decayed. But the shadows didn't match. The bed cast a shadow, yes, but there was another beside it, a darker patch shaped vaguely like a child curled under blankets. Your mouth went dry. Hello? You whispered. The shadow shifted. Not the bed, not the blankets. The shadow itself moved, rolling toward you as though it had heard its name. The floorboards sighed with the long exhale of the house. You slammed the door and stumbled back into the hallway. Behind you, something laughed softly. Not cruel, not kind, just the sound of breath given shape.
Chapter 7. The Basement Door. The basement had always been there, or at least you remembered seeing a door in the corner of the hallway. All day you had avoided it, pretending it didn't exist. But now, after the shadows and whispers and the journal's warnings, you knew you could not ignore it any longer. The door was low and squat, made of warped wood. Its surface was cracked, the paint peeled away like skin. The handle was cold, rusty, yet it turned smoothly, as if expecting you. You paused, heart hammering.
"I don't have to do this," you whispered, more to yourself than anyone else. But the house exhaled softly, a sound that seemed almost like coaxing. "Come." Summoning every ounce of courage, you pushed the door open. The basement yawned before you, dark and cold. The stairs descended steeply, blackness swallowing the first few steps. You held the flashlight ahead, its beam trembling against the walls. The air smelled heavier here, damp and sour, like earth and decay mixed with something else, metallic like old blood. The walls were lined with stones, uneven and slick with moisture. Your boots echoed on the stairs, but underneath the echo, you thought you heard another sound, soft, like scraping. A box, perhaps, or claws. You reached the bottom. The beam landed on a small, dusty room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of strange substances, bottles with faded labels, and objects that were hard to identify. Small toys, carved figurines, pieces of torn cloth. A child's drawing pinned to the wall. Stick figures with hollow eyes, one larger figure looming over them, drawn in thick, black strokes. Something stirred in the darkness behind the shelves. You turned, heart racing, but the light revealed only dust motes floating lazily in the air. Then you noticed the floor. The wood wasn't uniform here. It bulged slightly in patches, like veins beneath skin. One patch shifted, slowly, deliberately. You stepped back, flashlight shaking in your hands. A whisper brushed your ear. "Do you see now?" The voice was closer than before, curling around your skull. The floor beneath the bulge groaned, and suddenly the air was full of sound. A low, rhythmic breathing, pulsing like a heartbeat. You realized the sound was beneath you. The house itself inhaled and exhaled, and the movement beneath the floor matched it perfectly. You crouched, peering closer. The floorboards weren't just warped, they were breathing, stretching and contracting, rising and falling, as though something massive lay hidden beneath. The thought clawed at your mind. Something alive, something waiting, something that had learned your name. A cold wind brushed past your neck. You turned sharply, flashlight sweeping the room. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally, forming shapes you could not recognize. Figures with elongated limbs, faces too faint to see, yet you could feel their eyes. The floor beneath your feet shifted again, heavier this time, and you realized with a jolt that the house wasn't just alive. It was aware. It was watching, learning, and waiting. You scrambled up the stairs, nearly tripping. The door closed behind you with a soft click, as if satisfied. You leaned against it, gasping, the words of the journal echoing in your mind. It does not want visitors, it wants tenants, blood, breath. The house exhaled, and you knew, without a doubt, it was hungry. The third night. The third night arrived like a weight pressing down from above. By now, the house was no longer a backdrop to your fear. It had become a living presence, a predator moving through the boards and plaster. Every sound was magnified, every groan or sigh a deliberate message. You stayed in your small room for much of the evening, flashlight clutched tightly, journal pages from the study laid before you like shields. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the windows black, hollow, like empty eyes staring back at you. The breathing began again as it always did, slow, measured, patient. But tonight it was different. It matched your own rhythm perfectly, stretching with every inhale, contracting with every exhale. You held your breath once, and the house inhaled for you. You exhaled slowly, and the walls answered in kind, creaking, sighing, stretching. "You're alive," you whispered, voice cracking. You're alive." The reply came, soft, everywhere at once. Alive because you are. Alive because I let you be. You jolted upright, flashlight swinging. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the wallpaper itself breathed in tandem with the house. Shadows undulated in corners, bending and stretching with a life of their own. It was then you noticed the mirror across the room, one of the old cracked shards still intact. Your reflection rose as you did, but with a faint delay. A second later, the reflection's hand lifted when yours hadn't moved. Its head tilted slightly, mimicking your movements, almost playfully. "No," you muttered. "I'm in charge. You don't." The house answered again in the softest of whispers. "You are mine as long as you breathe. I learn. I follow. I keep." Something shifted in the shadows. At first it was barely perceptible, a distortion in the corner of the room. Then a shape solidified. A figure, faceless, blacker than the shadows, mirrored your stance. You lifted your hand, it lifted its hand. You blinked, it blinked. Panic rose like fire in your chest. You wanted to run, but the door was still locked. You couldn't leave. The air grew thicker, harder to draw in. Your own chest ached, lungs tightening, as though the house had pressed itself into the very walls of your body. You stumbled to the bed, gripping the edges, trying to anchor yourself in reality. "I keep breathing for you," the house whispered again. And then it did something new. The mattress shifted, not last time, but as though something had lain across the foot of the bed. Something that moved deliberately, curling around your legs without touching skin, tracing a path that felt alive. A cold draft brushed your face. You froze. The shadows around the room began to stretch upward, flowing along the ceiling, forming shapes that writhed just at the edge of perception. Your reflection in the mirror shifted again, but this time it smiled, an expression you did not make. The house exhaled, filling the room with a sound like a chorus of lungs, and you realized the terrifying truth. It didn't just mirror you. It had begun to teach you how to move, how to breathe, how to exist within its walls. Every inhale you drew, every motion you made was already shared with something vast and patient, waiting for the moment you would stop. And when you closed your eyes, trying to reclaim control, the shadows moved closer, patient and inevitable. You were no longer alone. Chapter 9. The Portrait Room. The next morning, or what passed for morning within the house, you found the courage to explore again. The previous night's terror weighed heavily in your chest, your limbs aching as if the shadows had left marks you couldn't see. But something drew you. A corridor you hadn't fully investigated, a door tucked beneath a faded archway, its frame carved with twisted, unfamiliar symbols. The door gave way with a low groan. Beyond it lay the portrait room. Rows of paintings covered the walls, all framed in blackened wood. At first glance, they were ordinary. Men in suits, women in stiff dresses, children clutching toys. But as your flashlight swept across the room, a chilling pattern emerged. The eyes followed you. Not merely turned in your direction, but they shifted independently of the brushstrokes, glimmering with life. Your hand hovered over a small girl's portrait. Her eyes widened as you moved, then blinked. You stumbled back, heart pounding. "Impossible," you whispered. The walls seemed to pulse in answer. Shadows crept along the corners, stretching toward the paintings. You shone the flashlight across them, one by one. A boy in a sailor suit smiled as you approached, a thin, crooked smile that was not in the original painting. A woman in a lace collar turned her head ever so slightly, lips moving, whispering something you couldn't hear. You stepped closer to the largest portrait,
a man with hollow eyes and a faintly smiling mouth. His gaze met yours, and suddenly your reflection in the glass behind the frame shifted. Your face pale, lips stretched in a grin you did not make. The house inhaled. The boards beneath your feet groaned. Your shadow danced along the wall, but the other shadows did not move like you. They wriggled, detached from your body, reaching toward the portraits as if pulling something from within them. A whisper slithered into your ear. See them? They stay because they learned to breathe. You stumbled back, bumping into a pedestal. A small journal lay atop it, bound in black leather, smaller than the one you had found in the study. You opened it, hands shaking. The pages were filled with sketches, stick figures, children, and distorted faces, their eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Words scrawled between the drawings. The house wants you. It keeps you moving. It keeps you alive. But only if you follow. A breeze passed through the room. The curtains swirled, even though the windows were closed. And then the largest portrait shifted. The man's head tilted, his lips moving in a silent laugh. You couldn't look away. Your reflection in the nearest mirror no longer matched your movements. Every motion you made, your mirrored self did slightly later, and the shadow behind you stretched even longer, curling toward the floor as if reaching for something unseen. The air thickened, your lungs aching as if each breath were filtered through the walls themselves. You felt dizzy, your knees weak, and then a sound that made your blood run cold. A soft, dragging step from behind the portraits, slow and deliberate. Something inside the wall had moved, shifting closer, unseen yet fully present. The house exhaled, deep and satisfied, filling the room with a weight that pressed into your chest. You realized with horror, the portraits were not just watching you, they were learning you. And one day, if you stayed too long, they would leave the frames and step into the hall.
Chapter 10. The Attic. The attic staircase creaked under your weight, each step protesting in long, drawn-out groans. You had avoided this space until now, convinced that the shadows, whispers, and portraits were enough. But curiosity, or perhaps a deeper compulsion, drove you upward. The attic door was narrow and low, its hinges rusted with age. When you pushed it open, the air hit you like a wall, cold, dusty, and thick with the smell of aged wood and something sweeter, almost rotting. The flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a cramped space filled with trunks, broken furniture, and piles of forgotten belongings. Toys were scattered across the floor, wooden soldiers with chipped paint, dolls missing eyes, small wagons with wheels frozen by rust. They were arranged as if waiting for someone to return, frozen mid-play. A faint sound reached your ears, the patter of small feet, soft and uneven, moving just beyond the light. You froze, heart hammering. "Hello?" you whispered, voice cracking. No answer, only the scratching of tiny claws against the wooden floor, echoing in the low ceiling. The flashlight beam trembled as it swept across the room. Shadows coalesced into shapes, crouched and crawling, moving just at the edge of perception. Something small darted across the beams. A child? A doll? You couldn't tell. The forms twisted unnaturally, limbs bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. One of the dolls shifted on its own, turning its head toward you. Its glass eyes reflected the flashlight, wide and unblinking. A whisper curled through the attic, soft and cold. "Play with us. Breathe with us." You stumbled backward, tripping over a trunk. The lid swung open with a crack, spilling its contents. Old clothes, letters, a cracked porcelain doll whose mouth seemed to move in the dim light. The air thickened, making every breath a labor. Then you heard it, the dragging of something heavier, moving beneath the floorboards. The attic seemed to pulse with each exhale of the house, the walls stretching upward and the ceiling contracting. You realized with a jolt, it was following your breathing again. Every inhalation you took was mirrored by a movement in the shadows, a response from something alive inside the wood. The small shapes darted closer. Tiny whispers threaded together into a chorus, faint but distinct. Keep breathing, keep moving, stay with us. You pressed yourself against the far wall, the flashlight trembling in your hands. One small figure crawled from beneath a pile of trunks, limbs bending at impossible angles. Its head tilted toward you, lips opening and closing as though trying to speak. A gust of cold wind swept through the attic. The doll's eyes glinted, the shadow children froze mid-step, and the house exhaled once more, deep and satisfied. You realized with the weight of certainty that the attic wasn't just storage, it was a nursery, a holding place, and you had just arrived. Your chest ached, lungs straining as the house breathed through you, synchronizing every motion, every inhalation, every tremor of fear. The whispers rose, layering over each other into a single low chant. Keep breathing, stay with us, always with us. And for the first time, you understood. You were no longer a visitor. You were part of the house.
Chapter 11. A Visitor. The following morning, or what passed for morning inside the house, you lingered in your small room, staring at the walls as if willing them to stop moving. Every groan of the floorboards, every whisper through the cracks made your pulse spike. You hadn't slept. Your chest felt hollow, lungs still tight from the house's relentless rhythm. A sound outside the front door startled you, a low, gravelly knock. You froze, hand trembling as you held the flashlight. The house, as if aware of your hesitation, exhaled slowly. "Who's there?" you called, voice thin. The knock came again, firmer this time. Hesitant footsteps scuffed along the gravel. Then a voice, dry and cautious. "You shouldn't be here." You swallowed, heart pounding. Who's there?" The door rattled slightly. A woman's face appeared in the narrow gap of the cracked door. Her skin was pale, eyes sharp and wary, lined with exhaustion. She held a bag close to her chest. "The Kessler house," she said, voice low. "You can't stay here, not alone. It's alive. It watches. It learns." You stepped back. "Alive? You mean ghosts? Stories?" She shook her head. "No, it's worse. It's not just stories. It keeps the ones who enter. Breath, movement, it doesn't let go. You're already part of it if you've been here more than a day." Your stomach twisted. I haven't. You can leave," she said sharply, "but it won't let you, not easily. If you try, the doors will lock, the windows will twist to walls. It breathes for you, it moves with you, and if you stop, well, you don't want to find out." You took a step toward the door. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I lived to tell it," she replied, voice dropping. "Years ago. I thought I could ignore it, cheat it, sneak away. The house doesn't forgive mistakes. It keeps what it wants, and it's patient. It learns names, habits, your breath. I got away, barely. Others weren't so lucky." Her gaze was unyielding. "If you leave, don't look back. Don't try to move faster than the house allows, and don't sleep here. If you sleep, it claims more than you know." A tremor ran through you. Is there a way to fight it?" The woman's expression softened, almost pitying. "No, not truly. You can resist for a time, but it always wins. You have to stay aware, awake, moving, or it will teach you in ways you won't understand until it's too late. She stepped back, pressing her hand against the door. I have to go. Remember, keep breathing, keep moving, and pray it doesn't like your name. Then she was gone, leaving the door rattling in the wind. The house exhaled long and slow, as if sighing with satisfaction. The shadows in the hall stretched towards you, and you realized something terrifying. She had been right. You were already part of it. Your lungs ached, your chest tight. Every exhale matched the house's groan. Every step you took reverberated through the boards, mirrored by something beneath the floors, something patient and waiting. And outside, the sun burned weakly through gray clouds, but inside, the house's darkness had already claimed the day.
Chapter 12. The Fourth Night. By the fourth night, exhaustion had wrapped around you like a shroud. Sleep was no longer a possibility. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the walls reminded you that the house was awake and watching. Your chest ached, lungs burning from the constant mimicry of its rhythm. You sat on the edge of the bed, flashlight trembling in your hands, journal pages spread around you like fragile shields. The breathing began slowly, at first soft, almost polite. Then it grew, expanding into the room like a tide. Each inhale drawing the air from your own lungs, each exhale pushing back against you. The shadows in the corners shifted with an uncanny intelligence. You rose, hands outstretched to steady yourself, and the house moved in tandem. The walls stretched, the floorboards groaned, and the ceiling seemed to bend as though the room itself was taking a breath alongside you. You tried to step backward. The floorboards matched your motion, sliding slightly underfoot, as though mirroring your hesitation. You reached for the door. It resisted, locked again. A whisper slid through the darkness. Do not stop. Breathe with me. Move with me. We are one. Your reflection in the cracked mirror trembled. You raised a hand. Your mirrored self lifted after a delay. The shadows along the walls curled toward you, elongated, stretching to meet the shapes of the paintings, the toys, the children's sketches that haunted every room. Panic surged. I'm not yours, you shouted. The house exhaled, a low, resonant sound that filled every corner, vibrating in your chest. Your words faltered, swallowed by the weight of it. It was patient, massive, deliberate. It did not rush. It simply existed, and you were caught inside its rhythm. Your heartbeat quickened, matching the wall's pulse. Each breath you tried to take alone was answered with the house's inhale, forcing you into a cadence you could not escape. The shadows along the corners grew taller, darker, some twisting into forms vaguely humanoid. Others seemed to crawl along the floorboards, unseen but felt, brushing against your ankles, leaving a chill that sank to your bones. You sank to the floor, gripping your knees, gasping. The mattress beside you shifted once, then twice, as though a heavy weight pressed down deliberately, reminding you of its presence. We keep you, it whispered, because you breathe, because you move, because you let us. You coughed, trying to resist, to pull away, but the house inhaled with you, mirrored you in every motion. Every trembling step, every shallow breath, every faltering movement, it was echoed, magnified, and absorbed. Hours passed like minutes. Minutes stretched into eternity. The shadows grew restless, swirling, twisting into shapes that mimicked you, followed you, mocked you.
Your body ached, your lungs burned, but the house would not let you stop. And when you finally allowed yourself to lie down, exhausted, the mattress sank beside you once more. A whisper came through the pillow. Sleep, and we breathe for you, always. And the house exhaled, stretching through the walls, the floors, the ceiling, and into your very chest. You understood now. You were no longer a visitor. You were a part of it.
The walls open. By now, you moved through the house with a strange mixture of fear and familiarity. The walls groaned with every step, echoing your heartbeat and mimicking your movements. But as the fourth night deepened, you noticed something new. The walls themselves seemed to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. A hallway you had walked countless times appeared slightly longer. A corner that had always been solid now seemed to hollow, the wallpaper rippling like skin. You paused, hand pressing against it, and the surface gave a little, soft, pliant, alive. The house exhaled. With trembling fingers, you pressed harder. The wall bowed inward, revealing a narrow opening, dark and tight. Dust rose from the gap, and a cold draft blew toward you, carrying faint whispers. You peered inside. A passage, lined with rough stone, twisted downward into darkness. It wants you to see. The whisper slithered through the hall, brushing your ear. You took a hesitant step forward. The passage smelled of damp earth, rust, and something else, something metallic. The floor beneath your boots was uneven, rising and falling like the pulse of a living thing. The walls throbbed with every breath you took, echoing your own rhythm back to you. Shadows moved ahead, flitting along the edges of your flashlight. Shapes too long, too dark, too fluid to be human. They stretched toward the passage, then recoiled when you approached. One seemed to linger, watching, almost curious. The farther you went, the stronger the sensation became. The house itself was alive beneath the surface. You pressed your palm against the stone, feeling faint vibrations. Something vast slivered just beneath your touch, unseen yet undeniable. At the end of the passage, a heavy wooden door appeared, blackened with age. Symbols, twisted and indecipherable, were carved deep into the surface. The whisper came again. "Beyond here is what feeds me." Your hand shook as you lifted the latch. The door opened slowly, revealing a cavernous space below the house. Roots, pipes, and tangled wood crisscrossed the walls. Faint, pulsing lights glimmered in the dark, like veins of some colossal organism. The air was thick and heavy, vibrating with every inhale and exhale you took. In the center of the chamber, a pit yawned, dark and deep. Something moved within it, a shadow too large to define, writhing, stretching, and undulating as if alive. Whispers rose from the pit, layering together into a chorus. Breathe, move, live, or join us. Your stomach churned. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to run, but your chest tightened. You realized with sickening clarity, the house did not just breathe for you, it fed on you. Every movement, every breath, every fear was fuel. And if you stopped, even for a moment, the walls themselves would claim you. The whisper curled around your ears once more. Come closer. See what keeps us alive. See what keeps you breathing. The house exhaled, long and low, filling the chamber and your very lungs with its presence. Chapter 14. The Bargain. The pit at the center of the hidden chamber pulsed with a strange, living rhythm. The house exhaled around you, a sound so deep it vibrated through the stone walls and into your chest. You wanted to flee, but your legs were led, your lungs tethered to the rhythm of the walls. Then it spoke. Not a whisper, not a breath, but words full and deliberate,
echoing from every corner, every creak, every shadow. You are mine. You have been mine since the day you arrived. You breathe, I keep you. You move, I follow. And now, you may choose. You stumbled backward, flashlight trembling. Choose what? Life, the house replied, or freedom. But freedom comes with cost. A chill ran down your spine. What cost? To leave is to give up your breath. To stop is to join us. To stay is to survive, but only as part of me. I offer safety, but it is not the life you knew. Do you understand? You swallowed, heart hammering. The shadows along the walls began to stretch taller, moving independently, curling toward the pit as though drawn to something living. Shapes writhed there, indistinct but alive, faces hidden in darkness. Stay, the house murmured again, and I will keep your breath steady. I will not let it falter. You will move, you will live, but always with me. Leave, and the doors will close, the floors will twist, the walls will consume. The choice was impossible. Every instinct in your body screamed to flee, to run far from the house, far from its exhalations and shadows. Yet even imagining leaving filled your lungs with a phantom weight, a sense of being torn from yourself, unmade. You took a tentative step closer to the pit. The shadows recoiled slightly, then circled you, brushing against your legs, rising like smoke toward your face. You coughed, lungs burning, and felt the rhythm of the house settle in your chest again. Decide, it whispered, or be decided for. For a moment, clarity struck. You could stay, synchronize fully, breathe safely within its walls, but you would no longer be free. Every movement, every thought, every breath would be mirrored, guided, owned. But you would survive. Or you could run, risk everything, fight against the rhythm, gamble that your lungs and limbs could escape a house that had already learned your name. Your chest heaved, sweat stung your eyes. You could feel the pulse of the walls in your fingers as you pressed them against the stone, as if the house itself waited for your answer. Then the whisper came again, soft and patient. Breathe. Choose. The shadows paused. The pit pulsed. The air trembled. And for the first time, you understood that no matter what you decided, the house would not release you entirely. It could wait, it could learn, and it always waited for those who underestimated its patience. Chapter 15. The Last Night. Night fell like a shroud, thicker and colder than any before. The house seemed to inhale as the sun disappeared, filling every corridor, every room, every shadow with a living presence. Your body ached, lungs burning from the relentless rhythm. The walls groaned with anticipation, the floorboards quivering beneath your feet. You moved cautiously through the hallways, flashlight trembling in your hands, shadows curling toward you with unnatural speed. The portraits followed your every step, the eyes glinting with intelligence and hunger. Toys in the attic shifted slightly, as if pushed by unseen hands. Then you heard it, a chorus of whispers, layered, deep, omnipresent. Breathe, move, live with us, or stop, join us. The walls themselves began to bend outward, revealing glimpses of rooms you didn't remember, spaces that had been hidden behind panels and wallpaper. Shapes formed and dissolved in the corners, humanoid but impossible, limbs bending at angles no human body could manage. The shadows reached, grasping, pulling at the edges of your mind. Your reflection in the mirror twisted, smiling when you did not. You pressed your hands to it, and it pressed back, cold, resisting.
The house exhaled through the floors, the walls, the ceiling, and you felt it in your chest, as if it had claimed your heartbeat. A sudden shift in the air drew your gaze downward. The pit in the basement, hidden until now, pulsed with something vast, alive, thrumming with a rhythm that matched the house itself. You realized then that the house was not just alive. It was a network, a single organism, and you were its prey and its pulse. "Choose," it whispered again. You felt your knees give way. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet your body felt heavy, tethered to the rhythm, to the breathing, to the house itself. You tried to run. Doors resisted, floors warped, shadows thickened, brushing against you, slowing you, pressing into your mind. And then you understood. Freedom was impossible. The house had learned your name, your breath, your very movements. Every attempt to escape was anticipated, mirrored, absorbed. You sank to the floor, chest heaving, gasping, lungs straining. The shadows paused, the walls softened, the exhale slowed. The house watched. It waited. "Breathe," it murmured. "Stay, and you live. Stop, and join us." Tears ran down your face. Exhausted, trapped, tethered to its pulse, you made your choice. You let yourself breathe. The shadows recoiled slightly. The walls exhaled in satisfaction. The house settled, stretching, sighing, a deep, resonant rhythm pulsing through the structure. You were alive, but no longer alone. Your chest rose and fell in time with the house. Your movements mirrored its pulse. Your breath was no longer entirely your own. You were part of it, a tenant, a survivor, and a prisoner all at once. Outside, the sun rose weakly, but inside, the house breathed. Always. Patient. Vast. Eternal. And you understood at last. It did not merely keep its tenants alive. It became them, weaving their lives into its walls, learning, waiting, breathing. You closed your eyes, surrendering to the rhythm. The house exhaled, and in that breath, you were lost.